COVID-19 outbreak in Malaysia since 2020 has impacted the operation of physical activities, mainly jobs, education, and social arts, forcing individuals to conduct their tasks from their homes in isolated terms. Thus, this research is conducted to investigate the adverse psychological impacts of online learning towards university technology practitioners and students during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, the purpose of this study is to investigate and identify the impact brought onto the average person in relation to the psychological challenges faced by UTP students along with solutions. UTP's online learning is conducted in such a way where the lectures, labs, and tutorials are through video conferencing platforms. Students are only able to perceive the intellectual deliveries of their daily classes with limited interaction with their respective lecturers. Additionally, the students would also have to experience a new structure of curricula and examinations, which may take an effect on the mental health of students as the change was simply too sudden to bear. Hence, according to mental factors taking effect towards university students, we have identified a couple of problem statements.
In order to understand the idea of this research, a base foundation of the problem to be solved or studied is required. Therefore, the problem addressed in this research would be in the focal point of psychological hurdles faced by UTP students with their mental capacity of dealing with the consequences in online learning. Now, it is a known fact that studying closely relates to the psychological stability of a person. With that being said, this research will be concluded with the emphasis on the adversity of online learning with possible solutions. The issues to be investigated are listed as follows, which are their ability to maintain their grades, provide self-care, the lack of experience in preparation for what's next in their future, and overall perception of university lifestyle. The problem statement of this research acts as the reflection of what is required to overcome this issue. With the problem stated, it is now clear that this study may proceed with the research questions in relation to the problems.
Moving on, the problem stated earlier can be further studied through research questions regarding the adverse psychological impacts of online distance learning towards the UTP students during the COVID-19 pandemic. What is a research question? So, research question is a specific inquiry that lies in the core of the research, as it would help define the research process as well. It is very important to ask the right questions so that it will lead to a more accurate research outcome. And for this research, we have prepared 3 questions that will provide a deeper insight in response to the research objectives later on, which are: firstly, what are the various psychological impacts faced by students during online learning? And secondly, how do students deal with the psychological challenges to cope with online learning during the pandemic in general? And lastly, what are the changes in the way students socialize from a psychological perspective throughout COVID-19 that can be observed or discovered compared to during the pre-pandemic era? And that is all for the research questions in this study.
Hello, I'm Azim, and in this part, I'll talk about the objective of our study. So first of all is to understand students' description on the medium of learning which affects the psychological state during the online learning that may affect the students' learning motivation during COVID-19. Secondly is to study the opinions on the methods students practice to overcome possible psychological challenges due to online learning during the COVID-19 pandemic. And lastly is to find out if the online learning during COVID-19 has altered the way students socialize with each other, such as behavioral changes when compared to during pre-pandemic era from a psychological perspective.
Hypothesis is a clear statement of what is intended to be investigated, and it should be specified before doing any research, and it should also be openly stated in reporting the results. And by making the hypothesis clear, it helps to identify research problems, the key concepts involved in research. And the hypothesis we have determined in our survey is the null hypothesis and the alternative hypothesis. Null hypothesis is when a population parameter is the same as a hypothesized value, and for alternative hypothesis is when which the difference between 2 or more variables is anticipated by researchers. And from our survey, the null hypothesis, it is that the students are suffering from psychological impacts or challenges due to online learning during the COVID-19 pandemic. And for the alternative hypothesis is that the students are not suffering from psychological impacts or challenges due to online learning during COVID-19 pandemic.
why is this research important to be conducted during this era of pandemic and online learning? The idea of online learning is presented as a revolutionary upgrade to the education sector. Even so, the issues that arise in the midst of this change has been alarmingly overlooked by both parties, being the students and the educators. Studying this case is important to understand the student's perspective on the medium of learning and adverse changes in their psychological state. On top of that, this research is also conducted to prove the validity of said hypothesis. Upon completion, this research will also help students of UTP to understand the importance of psychological health in order to extend their mental capacities in learning.
For our research methodology, we chose the mixed method as our research method, specifically quad-qual, with the heavily quantitative and some qualitative questions. And we had done a set of questionnaires through Google Form to be distributed to our targeted respondents, which were the undergraduate UTP students covering 14 different courses through WhatsApp and Telegram. Our target was at least 5 students per course. That makes our target to be 70 respondents. However, we managed to receive responses from 94 respondents instead. Moving on to findings and discussion, through the findings, we get to analyze the survey's response based on our research questions to come up with a discussion. These are the research questions that were mentioned before. Various psychological impacts faced by students during online learning. The majority of respondents get 4 to 5 hours of sleep at night per day. Most of the respondents have developed symptoms such as being easily agitated, overwhelmed, as well as having difficulty in relaxation. The survey indicated that they are sleep deprived. They are facing difficulty in receiving sufficient rest to revitalize their mental capacity daily, which leads to an effect on their mental stability with psychological complications such as stress, anxiety, and increase in the possibility of depression. The students are also prone to having mood swings or mood changes, and due to that, it could lead to anger issues. The third part of the findings would be the students' ability to cope with the psychological impacts of online learning during the COVID-19 pandemic. The majority of respondents has chosen lack of motivation as the type of issue that often resurfaces during the online learning period. Students have difficulty learning virtually and have distracting home environments, which leads to a lack of access to conducive study spaces. To cope with the issues that they face during online learning, entertainment, exercising, and spending time with their loved ones helps their brain release positive neurotransmitters such as dopamine and endorphins, which aid reducing one's stress and other psychological complications. The last part of the findings will be the observations made regarding how student socialization has changed throughout the COVID-19 compared to the pre-pandemic era from a psychological perspective. The students felt the socializing skills are going to be worse by the end of the online learning period, possibly due to the asynchronous communication between the educators and students, instilling anxiety in the students. This has disrupted their ability in being prepared for their daily academic routines, like being interactive in online classes or discussions. The thought of transitioning back to face-to-face learning is benefiting their psychological well-being, as they agree that face-to-face learning is effective learning. This boosts their excitement for a better surrounding to improve their socializing skill with their peers.
Now for recommendations. Students may implement efforts in managing their time better or seeking assistance in any issue, whether it be personal or work-related. Priorities may also be realigned in order to ensure a stable delivery of tasks according to the significance of each task. Distressing is also very crucial in allowing their mind to have a breather away from work once in a while. And lastly, students must also invest their time in sharing their problems with their family members, trusted friends, or even seek professional help. So in conclusion, this research covers all aspects and elements that exist in the phenomena of the pandemic in relation to students' learning adaptabilities. The mentioned issues have further proven our null hypothesis, which states that the students are suffering from psychological impacts due to online learning during the COVID-19 pandemic is accepted. This is supported by the analysis conducted on the collected data from 94 students of UTP through a survey. Analyzed data suggests that students are indeed suffering from a psychological adversity of impacts caused by online learning during the pandemic. And lastly, through the entire survey research, we have encountered a limitation that restricted us from attaining a fully accurate research, which was the lack of access to students from all courses in UTP. This was because we could only spread our survey to people that we have interacted with, such as our course mates and classmates, In addition to this, we had to depend on people who did have a wider connections to people from other courses to spread the survey for us. However, through our connection with people, we've at least managed to get a minimum number of 5 respondents per course, and at maximum it is 14 respondents. That is all. Thank you.